How dare you wear something like this? You're staff, not a guest.
A hiss sliced through the music. "Excuse me, what are you doing in that?" Heads turned. The chandelier's golden light fell on Veronica Whitmore, her lips curled in disgust. She stood in a shimmering silver gown, diamonds dripping from her ears like icicles. Her eyes were fixed on a young black woman near the dessert table, a woman who hadn't spoken a word. Amara Johnson stood tall, clutching a small clutch purse, her white dress simple but elegant, its satin fabric catching the light softly. She wasn't hiding. She didn't need to. This was the night she had dreamed of, the charity gala, where her hard work would finally be recognized. But in Veronica's eyes, she didn't belong. Around them, the ballroom pulsed with classical music and polite chatter. Waiters in black uniforms carried trays of champagne between billionaires draped in silk. The air smelled of roses and expensive perfume, but in this moment, everything froze. Veronica took a sharp step forward, her heels clicking like a threat. "I asked you a question," she said louder, making sure everyone heard. "Where did you get that dress?" Amara blinked, confused. I'm attending the gala," she answered carefully. Her voice was calm, but the tension in the air was tightening around her like a noose. Veronica let out a short, mocking laugh. "Attending? That's cute. Sweetheart, this is a charity event, not a costume party. That's a designer gown. I know everyone who was invited." Murmurs rose from nearby tables. People leaned in, their curiosity sharpening. Amara tried to smile politely. "I was invited by the foundation." Invited?" Veronica cut her off, stepping closer. Her perfume was overwhelming, sharp as her words. No. You're staff, aren't you? You're one of the servers, and you thought you could play dress-up." Heat rose to Amara's face. "No, I'm a guest." Veronica's voice rose theatrically. "Really? Then show me your invitation." Amara reached into her small purse, but before she could pull out the folded envelope, Veronica snatched at her shoulder. In one brutal, humiliating motion, Veronica grabbed the thin strap of Amara's gown and yanked. The sound of fabric tearing was louder than the orchestra. The strap snapped. The satin slid slightly off Amara's shoulder, exposing her skin to the icy air and dozens of staring eyes. Gasps rippled through the room like a wave. A waiter froze mid-step. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Amara's hands flew up to her chest, clutching the torn fabric. Her heart hammered against her ribs. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Veronica's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "I thought so," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Next time, know your place." Amara's world tilted. She could feel every gaze on her. Pity, judgment, amusement. Her throat tightened. She had spent years working, studying, fighting to earn a place in rooms like this. And in a few seconds, one woman's hatred had stripped that away. She whispered, "Please." "Stop." But Veronica wasn't finished. "Security should really do a better job keeping the staff where they belong," she said, turning to the crowd, inviting their laughter. No one laughed. But no one stopped her either. The music faltered. The pianist hesitated, glancing nervously at the unfolding scene. Amara stood frozen, humiliated under the glittering chandeliers, the white fabric clenched against her. She wanted to disappear, but a small, stubborn voice inside whispered, "Don't let her see you break." Veronica's smirk deepened. She turned slightly to her friends, ready to revel in her cruelty. And then a voice cut through the ballroom, deep, steady, cold. "Veronica." The crowd turned. The orchestra fell silent. Richard Whitmore, tall and commanding in a black tuxedo, stood near the entrance of the ballroom. He had just returned from his speech outside. His eyes locked onto the torn strap, then onto his wife. His jaw clenched. "What on earth have you done?" The air shifted. The power in the room moved. Veronica froze, her confident mask cracking for the first time. Amara, still holding her dress together, stared at the man whose voice had sliced through her humiliation like a blade. Every guest waited. The night had just changed. The crowd parted like water as Richard strode forward, his steps sharp, deliberate. Veronica straightened her posture instantly, forcing a bright smile onto her face. "Richard? Darling," she began, her voice sugar-sweet. "There's been a misunderstanding." But he didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed on Amara. Not with desire, but with clear recognition. "Are you all right?" he asked, stopping in front of her. Amara swallowed hard and nodded, clutching the torn strap of her dress against her chest. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice trembled. Her eyes were glossy, but determined not to let a single tear fall. Veronica stepped forward quickly, cutting the moment short. "She's not a guest, Richard," she declared, her tone dripping with superiority. "She's obviously staff. She was wearing someone else's dress. I just stopped her from embarrassing the event." The ballroom went dead quiet. Every word echoed. Richard turned to her slowly, his expression unreadable. "Staff?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Yes." Veronica doubled down. "She probably came in from the kitchen. Look at her dress, He cut her off. "Veronica." Just her name, but it was enough to make her falter. He turned back to Amara. "Miss Johnson, isn't it?" Amara blinked, surprised. Yes," Richard nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he raised his voice slightly, addressing the crowd, "this young woman is not staff. She is Amara Johnson, the recipient of this year's Whitmore Foundation Scholarship, the keynote guest. The reason this gala exists tonight." A shocked murmur rippled through the ballroom. Faces shifted from judgment to guilt. Whispers trailing like wind. Veronica froze. Color drained from her face. "What?" she whispered under her breath. Richard continued, his gaze sweeping the room. "Amara is a law student at Columbia, top of her class. She earned this scholarship through relentless work. Tonight, she was supposed to be celebrated, not humiliated." Flashback scenes flickered like memories. A tiny apartment with peeling paint. A young Amara at the kitchen table, studying under a flickering lamp while her mother worked the night shift. A letter of acceptance from Columbia University, clutched in her trembling hands. The scholarship announcement ceremony, where she stood shyly in front of cameras, her mother crying behind her. Late nights in the library, surrounded by towering stacks of law books. Amara had clawed her way into rooms like this through sheer grit. She wasn't here by accident. Gasps and awkward coughs filled the ballroom. A woman whispered, "She's the recipient?" Another man shook his head. Veronica didn't know, but Veronica stood motionless, her mask cracking. Her eyes darted between Richard and Amara, panic flickering behind her polished exterior. Amara felt hundreds of eyes on her again, but this time, the weight was different. Less mocking, more ashamed. She forced herself to breathe. Her voice broke softly. She wasn't used to this kind of attention. "Excuse me," she murmured, backing away slowly. "I just need a moment." She turned and slipped through the crowd toward the restroom, one hand gripping the torn strap tightly. The moment she pushed through the restroom door, the noise of the ballroom faded. Inside, under harsh white light, she faced herself in the mirror. Her hands trembled as she examined the ripped fabric. She tried to steady her breathing, but the humiliation washed over her all at once. The sneer, the rip, the stares. For a few seconds, she broke. Silent tears streamed down her face. "You don't belong here." Veronica's words echoed in her mind. Then, slowly, she straightened. She wiped the tears away with the back of her hand, inhaled deeply, and looked herself in the eyes. "No," she whispered to her reflection. "You worked for this. You're not running." She fixed the strap as best she could and lifted her chin. The tremor in her hands faded. Outside, in the ballroom, Richard's voice was low but firm as he spoke to his assistant. "Call the designer," he said. "I want her dress replaced before she walks that stage. Do you understand? The best one they've got." "Yes, sir." The assistant rushed off immediately. Veronica watched the exchange from across the room, her nails digging into her glass. Jealousy flared in her chest like fire. Her husband had never looked at anyone like that. Not even her. Her lips thinned into a cold, sharp line. As Richard's assistant disappeared, her eyes narrowed. Panic, envy, rage. Something inside Veronica shifted. She wasn't done. The ballroom buzzed like a disturbed hive. Clusters of elegantly dressed guests leaned close to each other, whispering behind jeweled hands. Every chandelier seemed to spotlight the scandal that had just unfolded. Laughter was lower now, tighter. The music played on, but even the violins sounded cautious. Veronica Whitmore stood in the center of her circle like a queen under siege, clutching a crystal flute of champagne. Her friends, socialites with sharp smiles and sharper tongues, gathered around, hungry for the real story. "She completely overreacted," Veronica said smoothly, her voice dripping with practiced charm. "I mean, I thought she was staff. Anyone would have. It's not my fault she decided to make a scene." Her closest friend leaned in. "But she's the scholarship girl?" Veronica forced a light laugh. "Exactly. Scholarship. She's not one of us. She should be grateful to even be here. I was trying to help her, not humiliate her." The women nodded hesitantly, but their eyes betrayed doubt. Whispers spread outward like ripples in water. Across the room, Richard listened without appearing to. He stood by the bar, hands clasped behind his back, his expression cool but unreadable. Two older businessmen nearby whispered in low tones. "Veronica went too far this time," one said. "The press will eat this alive," the other replied. "Scholarship recipient humiliated by host's wife? It's a scandal waiting to explode." Richard's jaw tightened. His public image, his foundation's reputation, was hanging in the balance. But more than that, he felt disgust at what his wife had done. He glanced toward the hallway where Amara had disappeared. He wouldn't let the night end like that. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Amara stood in front of a floor-length mirror inside a quiet dressing room. Her torn white dress was carefully folded on a chair, replaced by a temporary robe. She still felt the sting of humiliation, the whispers echoing in her head. The door opened softly, and Richard's assistant entered carrying a long garment bag with both hands, like it was treasure. "Miss Johnson," she said warmly, not a trace of condescension in her tone. "Mr. Whitmore asked me to bring this to you. He wants you to feel as you deserve to." Honored. She unzipped the bag with a flourish. Inside was a breathtaking gown, deep emerald silk, with subtle beading along the neckline, the same exclusive designer collection Veronica had worn. But this dress was even more striking. Amara's breath caught. "I can't wear that," she whispered. "Yes, you can," the assistant replied firmly. "And you will. It's already yours for the evening." As Amara slipped into the gown, memories surfaced unbidden. A flash of a cramped kitchen. Her mother, still in her nurse's uniform after a long shift, sitting across from her. "Amara," she had said, gently fixing her daughter's collar. "People will try to tear you down because they see your strength. Don't shrink. Stand taller." That voice echoed in Amara's mind now. She stared at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't broken. She wasn't out of place. She belonged. The assistant smiled softly. "You look incredible. Ready to show them who you are?" Amara lifted her chin. "Yes," she whispered. "I am." Outside, the ballroom's whispers grew louder. "She's coming back," someone murmured near the entrance. When Amara stepped out, the room seemed to pause. Heads turned, conversations faltered. The emerald gown caught the light like liquid jewels. She moved with quiet grace, her back straight, her expression calm. For a moment, even Veronica faltered. Her glass froze halfway to her lips. The woman she had tried to humiliate had returned stronger, radiant. Richard watched from across the room, a faint, approving smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He didn't need to say anything. Her presence spoke louder than any defense he could give. Whispers shifted again. This time, they weren't cruel. They were awed. She looked stunning. She handled that better than anyone I've ever seen. Veronica's in trouble. Veronica felt the tide turning against her. Her practiced smile slipped for just a second. Her friend leaned toward her. "People are talking," she warned. Veronica forced a laugh, but her eyes were cold. She set her champagne down with a soft clink and leaned closer to her friend, her voice a low hiss. "If she thinks this night belongs to her," she said. Her gaze locked on Amara like a predator sizing up prey. "She's mistaken. I'll make sure of it." Her friend shivered slightly at the venom in her tone. Veronica's eyes narrowed, glinting with something darker than jealousy. Vindictive intent. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The ballroom lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. A single spotlight illuminated the stage as the host stepped forward, microphone in hand, his smile warm and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing through the vast, glittering hall. "Tonight, we are honored to celebrate someone truly extraordinary. She represents resilience, brilliance, and the spirit of this foundation. Please welcome our keynote speaker, Miss Amara Johnson." A wave of applause rose, polite at first, then building. Backstage, Amara's hands trembled slightly as she held her note cards. The emerald gown shimmered under the soft lights. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a drum, but she lifted her chin. Her mother's voice echoed again, "Stand taller." She stepped onto the stage. The spotlight bathed her in gold. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The transformation from the waitress in the wrong dress to this poised young woman was breathtaking. For a moment, Amara paused, taking in the sea of faces. Veronica sat near the front, lips pressed in a tight line, her eyes sharp with envy. Richard, a few tables away, gave her an almost imperceptible nod. The kind of nod that said, "You've got this." Amara took a breath and began. "At 16, I used to study in the back of my mom's car while she worked the night shift," she said, her voice steady but full of quiet emotion. "We didn't have much, but what we did have was hope, and the belief that with hard work and grace, doors would open." The ballroom was utterly silent. She continued, "Speaking of perseverance, of the law as a tool for justice, of wanting to give back to the community that raised her. Her words were neither rehearsed nor embellished. They were real, raw, and powerful." By the end of her speech, a standing ovation erupted. Chairs scraped, hands clapped, and some guests even whistled. A few had tears in their eyes. Veronica clapped, too. Slowly, a brittle smile stretched across her face. But inside, jealousy burned like acid. She had never been eclipsed in her own ballroom. Until now. As Amara stepped down from the stage, flushed with triumph, Veronica leaned toward a waiter carrying a tray of red wine. Her voice was soft but icy. "See that young woman in the green dress?" she said. "She's standing right near the stage. Walk past her, and oops! Do you understand?" The waiter froze. "Ma'am, She slid a crisp bill into his hand and whispered something sharper. His face went pale. "Yes, ma'am." Moments later, the waiter approached the stage steps, his tray trembling slightly. Amara was accepting congratulations from a small group of guests when it happened. The tray tilted. A glass slipped. Time seemed to slow. Crimson liquid arced through the air toward the hem of her gown. But at the last second, a nearby guest, an older woman with quick reflexes, reached out, catching Amara's arm and pulling her slightly aside. The wine splashed on the marble floor and grazed the edge of her shoes, but missed the gown itself. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The waiter turned white. Richard's eyes snapped toward him instantly. He crossed the floor in long, decisive strides. "You," Richard said, his voice calm but cold. "Come with me." The waiter followed him into a side hallway, trembling. Richard folded his arms. "Tell me what happened. And don't lie." I didn't mean to," the waiter stammered. "She told me to. She said it was just a joke. She gave me money." "Who?" Richard's voice sharpened. The waiter's eyes darted nervously toward the ballroom. "Mrs. Whitmore." Richard's face hardened like granite. Meanwhile, Veronica was laughing lightly with her friends, pretending not to notice the near disaster. But her eyes were fixed on Amara with cold calculation. Backstage, Richard found Veronica alone near the dressing area, adjusting her jewelry. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice low. She looked up, feigning innocence. "Richard, what on earth are you talking about?" He stepped closer. "The waiter. The wine. Don't play dumb with me." Her mask slipped just a fraction, enough for him to see the glint of guilt. "I won't let you humiliate her again," he said, each word measured. She lifted her chin. "You're defending her over your wife? She doesn't belong here, Richard. She's making a spectacle." "No!" he cut in sharply. "You are." For a beat, neither of them moved. The air between them was electric with tension, the kind that doesn't explode immediately, but simmers, dangerous and quiet. Out in the ballroom, the music started up again, but the night had shifted. Lines had been drawn. Richard turned away, his expression dark with resolve. Veronica watched him go, her nails digging into her palm. The waiter's trembling words echoed in Richard's mind. "She told me to," and for the first time, his loyalty began to fracture. The heavy door of the Whitmore's private lounge slammed shut, muting the distant chatter of the gala. Richard stood by the fireplace, shoulders tense, hands clenched. The golden lamplight threw sharp shadows across his face. Veronica swept in after him, her sequined gown shimmering like armor. "Richard," she began, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Why are you storming off like this?" "You're making a scene." He turned slowly, eyes cold. "I'm making a scene? Veronica, do you even hear yourself?" She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "I don't know what that waiter told you, but you can't seriously think I—" "Stop." His voice cut through her words like a blade. "I spoke to him. He was terrified, and he told me everything. You paid him to humiliate her." For the first time that night, her polished smile faltered. "Richard, I was protecting us," she said quickly. "That girl was stealing the spotlight. People were talking about her dress, her speech, her presence. You know how ruthless this world is. I was just controlling the narrative." He stepped closer. "No, you were attacking her. Because she doesn't fit into your narrow, racist, classist little box." Her eyes flashed with indignation. "How dare you call me that? I was saving our image. You think these people respect us because of your charity speeches? No, they respect us because we set the standard. I wasn't going to let some girl embarrass us." Richard stared at her, stunned by the naked vanity in her words. The woman he had built a life with, standing before him in glittering perfection. And beneath it, rot. "You don't even see it," he said quietly. "This, what you've become, it's all vanity, all cruelty dressed up as class." "I don't even recognize you anymore." Her face hardened. "Don't act like you're a saint. You love the attention, too. You love being the benevolent billionaire. Well, I make sure people fear us. That's power." He shook his head slowly. "No, that's decay." The silence stretched, sharp and cold. Meanwhile, back in the ballroom, Amara hesitated near the edge of the crowd. She'd planned to quietly blend into the background after her speech. Instead, one of the event organizers approached her with a warm smile. "Miss Johnson, would you do us the honor of sitting at the head table?" She blinked. "Oh, I wouldn't want to impose. Nonsense!" "You're our guest of honor," the woman insisted. Moments later, Amara found herself seated among senators, CEOs, and philanthropists, a place usually reserved for the untouchable elite. Conversations hushed briefly as she took her seat, then slowly resumed, some voices warm, others brittle with surprise. Across the table, an older woman leaned in. "Your speech was remarkable, dear. Don't let anyone dim that light." "Thank you," Amara replied softly, grateful. Not everyone was as kind. A few of Veronica's friends exchanged thin-lipped glances. One whispered, "Bold, isn't she?" Another muttered, "Richard's really lost his sense of decorum." Amara pretended not to notice, but her spine straightened. Her mother's words echoed once again, "Stand taller." Later, she excused herself briefly to freshen up. As she passed a side corridor near the terrace, she heard familiar voices, sharp, venomous whispers. "Veronica. She actually thinks she belongs up there," Veronica hissed to her closest friend, a woman named Celeste, whose smile was as cold as champagne. "She's making you look bad, darling," Celeste purred. "If you don't put her in her place, people will talk." "Oh, I intend to," Veronica replied. "Tonight's not over. The after-party will remind everyone exactly who runs this world. No more speeches, no more gowns. I'll make sure she's exposed for what she really is. A pretender," Celeste giggled. "How delicious!" Amara froze in the shadowed hallway, her heart pounding. Their words slithered into her chest like ice. For a brief moment, a familiar doubt flickered. The same doubt that had haunted her through every barrier she'd broken. Maybe they'll never see you as equal. Then something steadied inside her. She straightened, pressing her palms together to stop them from trembling. No, she had earned her place here. She would not crumble now. She slipped away before they could spot her, her resolve tightening like a knot. Back in the lounge, Veronica's voice lowered to a dangerous whisper. "If you're so taken with her, Richard, why don't you parade her around? But I'll tell you this." She stepped close, eyes blazing. "Tonight, we end this little Cinderella story." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. And somewhere just beyond the closed doors, Amara prepared herself for the storm. The rooftop glittered like a dream. Strings of golden lights draped between sleek glass railings, the Manhattan skyline stretching endlessly beyond. Laughter floated through the crisp night air, mingling with the soft rhythm of a jazz band tucked in the corner. It should have felt magical, but beneath the glamour, something darker pulsed. Veronica Whitmore stood near the champagne bar, her red lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She watched Amara like a hawk watching its prey. Every flick of her manicured fingers, every whispered word to her click, carried purpose. Tonight wasn't about celebration anymore. It was about a trap. Amara stepped onto the terrace, shoulders back, the borrowed gown flowing around her like liquid silver. She felt the weight of stares, some admiring, others cutting. But after everything that had happened, she refused to shrink. Across the rooftop, Richard observed silently, leaning against a pillar near the edge. He hadn't approached her yet. Not because he didn't care, but because he'd made a choice. Veronica's cruelty had to reveal itself publicly, unmistakably. Veronica spotted her moment. "Amara!" she called sweetly, her voice slicing through the chatter. Heads turned. "Come here, darling. Let's get a photo together. For the foundation, of course." Amara hesitated. She didn't trust that smile. But with so many eyes watching, refusing could create another scandal. So she crossed the floor gracefully, heels clicking against the marble tiles. A tabloid photographer, conveniently stationed near the terrace railing, lifted his camera. He wasn't one of the event's official crew. Veronica had arranged this. As Amara reached her, Veronica looped an arm around her shoulders in a mock-friendly gesture. Her perfume was overpowering. "Smile," she whispered through clenched teeth. "This will be unforgettable." Just as the flash went off, Celeste, Veronica's ever-loyal accomplice, stepped forward with a flute of champagne, deliberately brushing against Amara's foot. It was a subtle, perfectly timed nudge. Amara's heel caught on the hem of her gown. Her balance tilted dangerously backward. Gasps echoed. For one horrifying second, she felt herself slipping toward humiliation. But instinct kicked in. She reached out, caught the railing, and steadied herself with quiet grace. Her heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. "I'm fine," she said softly, refusing to give them the spectacle they craved. Celeste laughed nervously, pretending it was an accident. "Oh my, so clumsy of me." Veronica's jaw tightened. She had planned the trip, the stumble, the splashy photo, a perfectly staged drunken girl ruins gala moment. But Amara hadn't played along. Richard's eyes narrowed. From his vantage point, he'd seen every calculated move. But he stayed where he was, arms folded, letting the tension brew. The truth was unraveling, thread by thread. Veronica tried another angle. She clinked her glass lightly. "Everyone! A toast!" she called, summoning attention. The crowd turned toward her, curious. She wrapped an arm around Amara again, smile stretched like glass. "To new beginnings," she said. "To generosity, to gratitude." Something in her voice made Amara stiffen. It wasn't a toast, it was bait. "Some people," Veronica continued sweetly, "don't understand how fortunate they are to even be here." "It's such a privilege, isn't it, Amara?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Amara met her gaze steadily. "I'm very grateful," she said simply. Veronica's smile flickered. She wanted a reaction. She wanted humiliation, but Amara wouldn't give it. Celeste leaned in and whispered something into Veronica's ear. Veronica's expression hardened. She was losing control of the narrative. The photographer shifted positions, camera ready. Veronica exhaled sharply through her nose. "Enough games!" Her voice rang out across the rooftop, loud and venomous. "You know what's funny?" she began. "Some of us spend our lives building legacies, writing checks, hosting these events. And then there are charity cases, people who should be serving the champagne, not sipping it." The words hit like a slap. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Champagne flutes paused halfway to lips. Cameras clicked. Flashes exploded. Amara's breath caught in her chest. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to tilt, the skyline spinning behind the frozen faces around her. Veronica's voice rose, fueled by her own bitterness. "Yes, I said it. She's an ungrateful charity case. Don't look so shocked." Someone had to say it. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The jazz music faltered. Even Celeste shifted uncomfortably. And then a different sound. A deep, calm voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Veronica." Richard stepped forward from the shadows, his presence commanding. The crowd instinctively parted for him. His eyes were locked on his wife, icy and unwavering. The trap had been set. But not the way Veronica imagined. All eyes turned toward them. The city lights reflected in the glass behind him like judgment, and Veronica suddenly realized the stage she'd built for Amara's humiliation was now hers. "Enough, Veronica!" Richard's voice sliced through the rooftop like a thunderclap. The crowd froze, caught between the glittering skyline and the sudden gravity of the moment. Veronica's mocking smile faltered. Her hand, still wrapped elegantly around her champagne flute, trembled just enough for those nearest to notice. He stepped forward, each stride deliberate, controlled, like a man who had made a decision long before speaking it aloud. Guests instinctively parted for him. In his tuxedo, framed by the Manhattan night, Richard Whitmore looked less like a billionaire host and more like a judge walking toward the bench. The DJ stammered as Richard extended his hand for the microphone. "Music off," Richard ordered quietly. The jazz band fell silent. All that remained was the soft hum of city traffic below. He turned slowly, gaze sweeping over the guests, then locking onto Veronica. "This ends now," he he said, his voice carrying an icy calm that silenced even the whispers. Richard, Veronica began, forcing a laugh. You're blowing this out of proportion. He didn't let her finish. No, for years I let you play your little games. Your need to be adored, feared, envied. But tonight, he paused, his jaw tightening. Tonight, you crossed a line. The rooftop crackled with tension. Every eye was locked on them. Veronica tried to step toward him, but he raised a hand. Don't, he warned. He turned to the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, I owe you the truth. Because what happened tonight, all of you saw it, was not a misunderstanding. It was cruelty, prejudice, and I will not let that stand. Not under my name. Veronica's face drained of color. Richard, stop this! He ignored her. The woman my wife has spent the evening attacking, he continued, gesturing toward Amara, is not a charity case. She is the recipient of the Whitmore Foundation's top legal scholarship. She graduated top of her class while working 2 jobs. She represents everything this foundation claims to stand for. Resilience, brilliance, dignity. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. Some people who had smirked earlier now lowered their eyes. And more than that, Richard said, his voice strengthening. She's the new legal consultant we're sponsoring for our upcoming international initiative. She's not just a guest here. She's the future of what we should be. Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then louder, swelling like a wave. Several guests nodded toward Amara with newfound respect. Veronica's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You're humiliating me, she hissed, stepping closer to him. No, Veronica, he said, turning back to her. You humiliated yourself. You looked at a young black woman in a beautiful dress and assumed she didn't belong. You tore her gown. You tried to stage her downfall. And now, everyone sees you for what you've become. The photographer's camera clicked furiously. Flashbulbs caught Veronica's pale, panicked face. She tried to claw back control. I was protecting us, protecting you. She's using you, Richard. Can't you see? These people will laugh at you for letting... Enough. His voice boomed across the rooftop, final and devastating. Amara stood slightly to the side, hands clasped before her. Her heart thudded, but she held her head high. This wasn't her doing. She hadn't asked to be defended like this. Richard turned toward her now, microphone still in hand. Amara, I am so sorry for what happened tonight. She took a deep breath and stepped forward. Her voice, though soft, carried strength. I appreciate your apology, Mr. Whitmore, she said steadily. But I don't need to be rescued. I never have. All I've ever wanted was respect. Her words landed like a hammer wrapped in silk. The guests nodded, some even murmuring, well said. For a brief moment, Richard's hardened expression softened. You're absolutely right, he said. Veronica let out a brittle laugh, desperation creeping in. You're siding with her? In front of everyone? I'm siding with decency, Richard shot back. She reached for his arm, panic breaking through her polished mask. Richard, don't do this, he stepped away. The microphone lowered slightly, but his voice remained firm enough for all to hear. Veronica Whitmore, he said slowly, each word precise. Consider this your last night as Mrs. Whitmore. The rooftop gasped in unison. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Celeste stumbled back a step, shocked. Veronica stood frozen, disbelief flooding her face. You can't mean that. I do, Richard said simply. Your cruelty ends here. The city lights glittered behind them as if marking a shift, power tilting away from privilege and toward justice. For the first time all evening, Veronica had no words. Cameras flashed like lightning, capturing her unraveling, and Amara. She didn't gloat. She didn't smirk. She simply stood tall, bathed in the cold, honest glow of truth. The sun rose over Manhattan like a spotlight, gilding the glass towers in gold. But beneath that glow, a storm was brewing. Not in the sky, but on every phone screen, every morning paper, every trending feed. Billionaire husband exposes wife's racist behavior at gala, blared one headline. Another read, Socialite Veronica Whitmore humiliates scholarship recipient, publicly shamed by husband. Clips of the rooftop confrontation flooded social media. The moment Richard said, "Consider this your last night as Mrs. Whitmore," played again and again, overlaid with captions, reaction videos, and commentary. Hashtags blazed across platforms. Prouder dignity wins. Crowder's gala scandal. Amara Johnson. Veronica's once carefully curated image cracked overnight. Sponsors distanced themselves. Charities quietly removed her from their boards. By mid-morning, Richard's legal team had filed separation papers. Her friends stopped picking up her calls. The same cameras that once adored her now devoured every stumble. Meanwhile, Amara sat at her small kitchen table, wrapped in a robe, scrolling through her phone with a mix of disbelief and quiet awe. Her inbox was overflowing. "Thank you for standing tall last night. I'm a law student too. You gave me courage. I've been the only black girl in rooms like that. The way you held yourself, I'll never forget it." Her eyes stung, not from pain, but from something softer, deeper. Vindication. Her mother shuffled into the kitchen, still in her nightgown, hair tied back. "Baby, they're talking about you on the morning news," she said, setting down 2 mugs of tea. Amara laughed weakly. "Yeah, I noticed." Her mom reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "You didn't let them break you. I'm proud of you, Amara. I always knew you'd make them see who you are." Amara swallowed a lump in her throat. "Last night felt surreal. I thought I'd crumble, Mom, but I heard your voice in my head. Stand taller." Her mother smiled, eyes shimmering. "That's my girl." Later that day, a sleek black car pulled up outside Amara's modest apartment building. Richard Whitmore stepped out. No entourage, no pretense. He looked tired, but resolute. "May I come in?" he asked softly. They sat across from each other in the living room, the city humming outside. He didn't offer empty apologies. He'd already done that. Instead, he placed a folder on the table. "I want you on the Foundation's board," he said plainly. "Not as a symbol, as a decision-maker. We need voices like yours, shaping what we do next." Amara studied him. "On my terms?" he nodded. "On your terms," a slow smile spread across her face. "Then yes, I accept." He extended his hand. She shook it firmly, not as benefactor and beneficiary, but as equals. That evening, as the headlines continued to swirl and Veronica's empire of social facades crumbled, Amara stood by her window, looking out at the skyline. Her reflection stared back. No longer the unsure young woman clutching a torn dress in a ballroom corner. She was something else now. Solid. Unshakable. A quiet montage flickered in her mind. Her teenage self, tying her apron before a long shift at the diner. Late nights in the library, eyes burning but determination fierce. The scholarship letter. The gala night. The rip, the speech, the trap. And finally, standing tall beneath the rooftop lights as truth shattered pretension. Her journey hadn't been easy, but it had been hers. The narrator's voice rose softly over the images, calm and firm. Dignity isn't loud. It doesn't tear others down. It stands tall when others try to humiliate. Amara didn't fight with cruelty. She answered with grace. And in doing so, she inspired thousands. A final beat. Share this story if you believe respect should never be determined by skin or status, but by character. The screen faded to black. The music swelled, hopeful, steady. A new beginning had arrived.